Hello, very good evening. Welcome to the Derac Conversation series powered by the Grey Matter. Our guest today is Ankur Borwankar. He is the founder of two brilliant ventures. One is called as Dictum Media House. It's a branding and marketing agency. And the second one is Indus Dictum. It's a editorial publication which publishes columns, article, news across a wide variety of topics. Besides being a founder of these two amazing ventures, Ankur is also an author, lawyer, entrepreneur, and a storyteller. So let's see if we can get Ankur to join us live. Ankur, I've sent you an invite. You just have to accept it.
Asha, you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Welcome to Dare Act, Ankur. How are you doing?
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, sir. I'm doing very well.
Fantastic. Um, just there seems to be some. Is my voice fine, Ankur, for you?
I can hear you fine.
You can hear me? Okay. Okay, then let's go with it. So, Ankur, super excited to have you join us today, and I do have a lot of questions to ask you. So, my first question, which I really want to know about, is that before actually pursuing law, you did your economics. You graduated in economics, and then went ahead and studied law. Could you tell us in the audience what were your reasons behind choosing these two subjects?
Sure. So, economics is a social science, law is a social science. There's a straight line can be drawn connecting the two. I am not overly fond of very straight lines, they don't present that much to look at. But essentially, the thought process was that we'd move from an understanding of economics in society. Uh, it arose from the interest of learning more about how the world works, and then a natural progression was, of course, to go on to law. I'd also during my time studying, I also worked at a couple of other institutions, primarily as a journalist. Um, that added and essentially it gave me an opportunity to learn more about, to explore my interests, to learn more about how the country works, and politics being the spine of all social interaction. Law was pretty much the next step, was the next logical step to take.
Yeah. Brilliant. And while you were studying economics, I understand you were also simultaneously working with as a as a feature writer for organizations like Network 18, NDTV Good Times. I'm really interested to know what has been the most fulfilling experience amongst the many that you've had while studying, and why.
Difficult to quantify. I'd say all of them provided their own unique um contribution to my trajectory. Um, it's at NDTV, I was primarily working in their food and lifestyle division, what is NDTV Good Times on the TV channel. I worked with a bunch of, and maybe you've heard of Highway on My Plate with Rocky and Mayur, quite a famous enterprise, very nice people. I had at that time worked on another show called Love Bites with Joey, and that came from the work that you mentioned prior, which was I worked with Burp, which today doesn't have, unfortunately, the name that it once did. But in its former glory, it was what Zomato is now. Zomato just democratized the whole thing by bringing in all sorts of reviewers from everywhere. At Burp, I used to do food and lifestyle writing. And writing being the central theme, that led me, I think it's an extension of an expression of one's ideas and an extension to one's thoughts and opinions. It's also, famously, it's a way to get your thoughts in order. So that led me into Indian Express, where I did a lot of daily and political journaling. Uh, these things bred in me the interest of of learning about how legislation works, of learning about how governance works, how policy is formulated. I started to see more and more where it went. So each of these milestones provided their own contribution. I think it would be tough to say which one was the most valuable or invaluable. Um, all in all, they led to the foundation of Indus Dictum, which we get to.
Where did you work the longest? I'm sure there must be a reason.
I think the first one, I think Burp was the longest. I was there for somewhere around 3 years, maybe slightly north of 3 years. And I was not quite in college at that time. It was thanks to a very kind editor. Burp didn't actually have a division in Pune. I pretty much finagled that job out of nowhere. I generated it because I contacted the then editor in Bombay, Mumbai, very nice gentleman called Antoine, and I had offered to do video reviews for them, and he came back with the alternate offer that why don't you just handle the written reviews in Pune, and I jumped at it. I couldn't say no to that job. 3 years over there, handling pretty much all of Pune, and I was subsequently replaced also by a very fine gentleman. All of them are still friends today. It was a great community when it was.
Very well, so nice to know. And I also read, I think it was one of the news articles which mentioned that while you were still an economics student, you actually filed your own case in the district consumer court. I'm very intrigued to know what was this about, what really happened, and how was it for you as a student to be, pleading your own case without a lawyer representing you?
You've clearly done a lot of research. It arose from Sony. Everybody's heard of Sony. It arose from a faulty product that did supplied. Actually, this was a smartphone I bought with my first ever salary, and there was a certain emotional attachment because when the phone failed, I pursued Sony. I submitted it for. I'll shorten the 3-hour story. I submitted it for repairs. It didn't. They repaired it and then they refused to return. I asked them to return it to me without the repairs because they were asking for 80% of the price of the phone for carrying out the repairs which I hadn't sanctioned to begin with, and then they refused to return it to me. So I tried all the usual avenues of contacting customer service, sending emails, raising flags and complaints. None of them panned out, and I had no choice. So then I did actually file this case that you're talking about in the consumer court. I think at the time I was in my second year of economics. Perhaps I should have mentioned this earlier. This was one of the stepping stones, a keystone on my journey to law. I represented myself. I got a lot of help from friends in the legal fraternity who helped me draft the case, and another very kindly judge who is currently still at the Pune District Consumer Forum. After 3 hearings where Sony did not appear, he granted an ex parte verdict, and he gave me what I wanted essentially.
Wow, that's amazing. And why it stands out in particular is that how many of us would actually take the pain to go and file a case, and especially nobody takes it seriously, and I'm sure that's why Sony also didn't turn up, because for them it would have been a very small amount. But the fact that you still went ahead and filed that case speaks volumes about what perhaps must have been going internally for you. So fantastic. And
it's a matter of principle. I wasn't so much after that.
Absolutely. And tell us, the 5 years at law school, what did you enjoy doing the most, and how has that experience benefited you now professionally when you look back?
Slight correction there. I did 3 years of economics as a separate degree and then 3 years in LLB.
Yeah.
To answer your specific question about law school, I think throughout law is an intellectual pursuit, and I hate that word. I've come to resent it, but no doubt there is a lot to be learned from the history value of precedent that law carries with it. In my college days, I think I was most attracted to intellectual property law. I pursued it to the extent where I went and signed up for WIPO courses, which, as I'm sure your esteemed audience knows, is the World Intellectual Property Organization, and was very interested in arbitration, specifically to do with patents and trademarks. These things, I mean, for very long now, intellectual property has been the real game, because as technology advances, software picks up, written content picks up, that sort of thing needs to be protected more and more. And unlike many other products or services, you don't have the same sort of protections. Most of these things are a right and rem, protection against infringement rather than a sort of preemptive protection. All of these studies, all of these fields led me down a very interesting path where I started to learn a lot of other. So I'll give you one point of contact. I understand that Coca-Cola was once approached by people who claimed to have the recipe for Pepsi, and they said, we'll give you this recipe, leave so much money outside an amusement park in Finland or some Scandinavian country. And Coca-Cola said, all right, and then promptly contacted the authorities and told them what was happening. The authorities arrested the people, the alleged criminals, because Coca-Cola understood that, look, we don't really care so much about the recipe of Pepsi because we have our own. And that led me down a very enlightening path of how these intellectual properties work. Sticking with Coca-Cola, I know, for example, that there are only 2 or 3 people in the world who know the actual recipe, and none of them are allowed to fly on the same flight. This recipe is not patented because that would mean it would have to be released to the world. It's a trade secret. It teaches you a lot about how the world works, not just the sort of legal grooming and structural grooming that you would otherwise. I think most people see it as a sort of boring job, but it can be very, very interesting if you want to do
it. It's interesting actually to know the field of interest that you picked up also. IP can be one of the most intriguing subjects, keeping in mind all it deals with is innovation. So excellent point right there. And while most of law students would spend their time during college doing legal internships, you explored and ventured into field of marketing and content development and product designing and whatnot. Tell us what and when did this interest develop? Like how did you come about knowing?
I don't like to be labeled. I think too often, at least in our parents' generation or the generation that preceded ours, it was always a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, not necessarily in that order. I've always found that these labels can be very constricting. Too many people start to identify by them, and then it becomes your identity. I didn't want that to happen. Ironically, I work in identity management and branding at the moment. The irony occurs to me now. But I wanted to see more. I wanted to see what was out there, which is why when economics spilled into law, I started seeing more and more how businesses work. I did get a job I think it was in the last year of my economics, and then leading into 2 years of my law, I was working in a firm in Pune, developing their business essentially as a BDM. That allowed me to learn about a lot of the entrepreneurial skills that are required to survive. Because, and I am certain this will speak to a lot of lawyers in your audience. What happens is all lawyers are entrepreneurs, and all lawyers create brands in the end. Whether you're part of a firm or you're an independent litigator, you are managing a brand. You're managing clients, you're managing invoices, billing, accounting, all sorts of things. So the bottom line is, as a lawyer, you're an entrepreneur. People don't always see it that way. but that is actually how it is. Um, I mean, I have lawyers in the family who do the same thing and meet very similar challenges to mine. So there's always a trade of experience that can happen here. Leading into my hypothesis that we are all not just lawyers or not just doctors or not just coders. We are actually much more than that. You have a family to go home to. You have maybe you have a book to write. Maybe you have that recipe you want to try out. All of these things I did at various times, simply because that interested me. And then, of course, I realized that these interests are so captivating that I decided I want to try this out. So I started working in social media. I started working in branding and management. It all came from content because a large part of the company I run now, Dictum Media, which provides a host of digital marketing services. I'm not trying to sell the product. I'm trying to lay the foundation for the statement that it all breeds from quality content. It all follows from the same vein of high quality thoughts and words. It did lead into the branding and marketing. I mean, for some people, it can be difficult to connect, but then the dots only connect in hindsight.
And I resonated so much with what you said, actually with everything that you said just now, and it's so relevant, right? What's the need to label? And I think a lot of labels are just mental, and we're just like, it's like a society thing. So it's also important at the same time to question, is this label our own made up label? Like, do we really want to make labels like that, or is it something that we've taken it from society? So that's a really, really good thought that you've pointed. Tell us, in the whole digital space, right? Digital marketing, product design. I know content is something which is your strength, but besides the content aspect of it, what do you really enjoy in this field of marketing, of product design, of helping clients brand themselves? What is that one thing which really drives you personally?
We started out with content initially. We still do have a news portal, uh, which I used to personally manage all the time. Um, it was absolutely, that was, I think, the highlight of my entrepreneurial journey. Um, with disrespect to what we've built at Dictum Media otherwise. And then that leads into all your auxiliary services, of which I'd say the most interesting one, the one that gets me up in the morning, is probably branding design in general. So every brand has a language. There's a reason that McDonald's arches are golden and on a red background, and you can recognize them from a mile away. They put them out on the roadside so you know you're approaching a McDonald's much before you actually see the sign. The same thing applies to, for example, Coca-Cola. The red and white also bled into what we know as Santa Claus today. I think creating that sort of identity, creating a unique, immediately recognizable design or language is what really puts the vinegar in me. It's a mark that I've put out in the world, of course, on behalf of a client. So ultimately, it all gets turned over as intellectual property. But it's still something that I look back and say, okay, hey, this is something that we did. This is something that others are seeing. It's a mark I made on the world. I think ambition is corrosive to contentment, and conversely, contentment is erosive to ambition. But a fine balance of the two is where I think my interest in branding lies, or at least in exploring the marketing phase and the branding phase.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. So after completing your law, you founded not one but two ventures. First, I want to say hats off for your courage. Secondly, what I want to ask you is, what was the thought process behind, starting these two ventures, and why did you start on your own? Was, this entrepreneurial drive there in you from the beginning? Like, how did it all pan out?
Yes, I think if you're talking about Indus dictum and dictum media, the Indus dictum arose from the itch to do right, to make things better. When I just finished my economics and entered law, India also at the same time turned around politically, and we entered a new phase. The phase we are still in. So by the time I was near graduation, I had already boiled into the phase where I decided I need to make the change, um, be the change you want to see, right? So being that change was the first step. I sat down and I created a portal. I got in touch with a lot of leading authorities, essentially judges, lawyers, authors, policy makers, politicians, um, who, who I thought would contribute to the voice that needs to be heard. These are voices that are still voices that are changing India, that are guiding, that are the guiding force in no insignificant amounts. And to give them a platform, I sat down and I designed Indus Dictum. They'd write in their articles, they'd submit them to me. I'm also I'm an advocate of free speech, completely unfettered. Perhaps that's another conversation. But Indus Dictum, I founded with the intent to have a completely censor-free publication. I didn't want, I do want opposing viewpoints. I don't want to tell people, no, you can't say this. Even, especially if you're a dissenter. In John Stuart Mill's essay on liberty, says it is exactly the person who thinks differently who we need to hear. In fact, Rosa Parks put it even more beautifully. She said, freedom of speech means nothing if it doesn't protect the freedom of the person who thinks different. That was what Indus Dictum was supposed to protect, still does. We wanted to not only secure their rights, we wanted to promote what they were saying, bring it out into the open, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. So if you disagree with one of our authors, we were very happy to have you write in and then publish your letter as well. Generate a conversation, create a civil dialogue platform, which I think is undervalued these days, or at least it's underrated, absent. Because I learned website design along the way, and I was of course working in the social media, I started Indus Dictum on my own. I did manage it on my own. I'm not trying to praise myself, I'm trying to say that it taught me a lot. It threw me so deep into the water that I had to learn how to manage the brand itself, because the brand grew out of hand very quickly. That then led into the brand management in general.
Excellent. I want to ask you this one question, Ankur. I think the message and the intention behind Indus Dictum is excellent, and to some level, it's promoting freedom of speech and expression, right? I mean, how can you tell somebody what they should believe in? But having a portal like that can attract a lot of criticism as well. So, first, have you received backlash on the portal and what the portal has expressed in terms of views? And if yes, how did you cope up with these kind of not so constructive feedbacks?
Indeed, a lot of people were rubbed the wrong way, and I'm sure many of them still have access to Grind with me. So you got a lot of hate mail about a lot of articles, but full credit to our authors, they were extremely civilized in their approach. We often found that their points were so well presented and that their thoughts were so complete that it became difficult to for any reasonable person to combat them without sitting down on a civilized table. We received our fair share of less than pleasant communications. But I think all in all, I wouldn't undo it. I wouldn't at any point say that, you know what, this maybe we shouldn't have gone that far. No, we did go that far, and we needed to go that far. We are also tied up. I'll give you one example. We're also tied up with a group of civil servants called the Constitutional Conduct Group, CCG. They publish and author articles and letters. I think they're somewhere around 200 retired civil servants who are purely here for the interest, in the interest of the nation and for the interest of betterment. They write a lot of stuff which doesn't sit well with, let's call them staunch supporters of the establishment. But that's just part of the game. Everybody who does this knows what they're getting into. And we did, to all the writers that we approached, and certainly all of them who submitted articles, they were all aware that, look, free speech means it goes both ways. That means somebody else has the absolute right to criticize you, and in fact even insult you. Another conversation for another time. It's all part of the same Article 19. Actually, it should say these things, but it just about stops short of guaranteeing the total freedom of speech. It's the only way to really progress. Only if you don't keep what you're thinking bottled up and really bring it out into public discourse, can you decide whether something is right or wrong. Especially if something is wrong. That's why it needs to be spotlighted, because otherwise you would have no way of knowing the quality of your own argument or the quality of your own convictions, how right you are.
Very, very powerful, and thank you so much for sharing that so honestly. And it's so relevant and so important to, I think, hear also sometimes, because it gives a lot of fresh perspective. And as I hear you say it, I think to some extent my mind is opening up, which I didn't know at some level had closed down. You know, it happens. I think it's a pretty common phenomena. So you're neither despite of being in the field of content in journalism, then also being an entrepreneur, you're a founder of two amazing ventures. You neither have a degree in journalism nor you've done your MBA, which are in the society sense, the most important, so to say, prerequisites. And you perhaps learned pretty much everything on the job. So I really want to ask and understand, Ankur, what is it that really drives you? What is it that keeps you going? And is it that you're some kind of a rebel? Because a lot of times, a few people do have rebel nature, and that kind of helps them push forward, move ahead professionally as well. So just want to know, what is it for you?
I can see why the title of rebel might come about. I don't do it with the intent of rebellion. It's all coming from the idea of, one, exploring my interests, and two, exploring the interests of society, or what is the betterment of society. I think we're looping sort of back to the label conversation. If I had done a journalism degree, it would have given me all of the technical qualifications to qualify, to identify myself as a journalist. But it wouldn't necessarily have endowed me with all the thought processes and all the opinion formulation techniques that go into good writing, that go into actually contributing to society. And I think the same thing really applies to things like MBA. You're finding more and more these days that people tend to do an MBA after getting work experience, especially the good universities. Take ISB, for instance, won't let you in for their course unless you have, I think, a minimum of 2 or 3 years of work experience. What they have realized over the years and over their pedigree is that you want people to learn a lot through experimentation. You want people to figure things out on their own, because when you for an autodidact like me, it becomes difficult to sit down and do 6 hours of college in one go and then retain everything. and I'm sure that problem has been faced by a lot of people across all streams. You learn best when you learn on your own. Uh, if you're exploring YouTube, if you're exploring manuals, reading books, studying from courses, Coursera, such and such, you're more likely to take up the interests that are innate, and you're more likely to then pursue them to their logical end. That is essentially, I realized that at some point in my professional life that look, I'm already interested in this. I don't. I'm going to pursue it towards logical end. Hopefully, a successful logical end. And I don't really. I personally don't really need the sort of educational degree to do that. But that is not to say that it applies to all people. If others, there's a lot to be gained from your education. I don't think we'd be sitting here having this conversation if we didn't go to school, if we didn't go to college. Um, Only about 60% of this country is literate. 40% can't even read a book. I mean, if you can read a book, you've opened up an entirely new world to every girl or boy who learns how to discern characters. And then the advanced version of that is you start to pick up degrees, you start to pick up more and more knowledge, especially in the specialized fields like journalism, which I mean, with to give them their due respect, good journalists show, and they come from good colleges. Um, maybe I'm not a good journalist, but I'm certainly interested in the field, and I didn't feel like there was too much value addition on a personal level pursuing a degree.
Wow.
I thought I'd learn through trial and error.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And my last question to you, Ankur, is do you have any advice for those who've not yet figured out where their field of interest lies and what is it that they really want to do professionally? Any words of food for thought?
Yeah. There are lots of us like that. Um, I think interests change over time, especially as information becomes more accessible, technology advances, and you're learning more things every day. People are now finding out that new jobs exist, new fields are being created. As we didn't have computer application, we didn't have smartphone application development 15 years ago. It's now it employs something like 30% of all coders. There's absolutely no. I often find people feel shame in not knowing what to do or where they're headed, but that's not. It shouldn't be that. You should absolutely keep exploring your interests if you have the ability to do so. Bearing in mind that somewhere at some point you'll find a way to at least something that keeps you going. Find something that gives you a reason to wake up in the morning, and like don't just be another brick in the wall. Right? Be something that you want to look back and say, all right, this is a story that I'm proud of, even if nobody else is as informed as you are. Um, keep the I'm hesitant to say keep the faith, but keep the faith.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And this has been an excellent conversation. A lot of takeaways, a lot of learnings, a lot of fresh perspective, Ankur. So thank you, and thank you for agreeing to do this. We know it's a Friday evening, and I'm sure you must have had a lot of things to do. And the fact that you took out time means a lot to us. And we hope you had a great time too.
Okay, very kind of you to have me, Shreya. And all the best for this for Grey Matter. I mean, I hope we need more people like you. We need more people doing new things and especially telling these stories which largely remain unknown.
Absolutely means a lot, Ankur, and we wish you all the best as well. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Shreya. You too. Bye bye.